1979, Moscow. The factory area is empty. It's Sunday. But the noise is heard near the workshop. The noise of blows and children's cries. Two teenagers were beating a boy named Gera attentively, enjoying the process. There was no need to hide because it was a day off. No one would come to the factory. The blows were accompanied by insults.
Your dad is freak. This ain't gonna happen to him.
When the beating was over, they began to intimidate.
If anyone finds out, you won't live.
The beaten boy stood up and, wiping the blood, turned around and shouted, "You're Nazis! No, you're worse than Nazis!" One of the attackers grabbed a metal rod and hit Gera on the head. The boy had no chance of surviving. They had no idea that the witness to the terrible scene was a worker Nikolai, who happened to be nearby. Without thinking twice, the men rushed after the criminals and managed to catch only one. It would seem that the story is over. Police station, court, and a prison for minors. But our investigation is just getting started. My name is Tommy, this is From Russia with Crime, and we begin. The detained teenager, whose last name was Fedchenko, immediately began to deny his guilt and accuse his friend. As soon as the investigator had time to pick up a pen and a piece of paper, one fact came to light. The detained teenagers had very influential parents. Fedchenko was the son of army general, and his friend Varfolomeev belonged to the group of Golden Kids. His parents were members of the USSR government. It's not difficult to imagine the further course of the investigation. The police squad was sent to the factory, but they were not looking for evidence of a murder. They were looking for an opportunity to present the situation as an accident. The factory is not a place for children to play. This was the position of the police. According to investigators, the children were just playing, and a tragedy happened, completely by accident. This might happen to everyone. The boy has broken ribs. This is because he fell down from a height. The bruises all over his body are due to the same reason. His skull is broken. This is because he fell down on a rock. A metal rod? Actually, there was none. The only problem was the worker Nikolai, who was the main witness. But his eyesight had deteriorated sharply, and he was unable to identify anyone. There is no surprise that the result of the investigation was a refusal to proceed against the teenagers. It would seem that the case is closed. Gera was buried, and two sadistic killers will continue to enjoy all the benefits of life at the expense of the influential parents. But suddenly, the police received an appeal. Pavel Varfolomeev, the same teenager who killed the boy Gera, was found in the forest. He wasn't alone there. He was accompanied by an axe stuck in his back. It's quite obvious that Varfolomeev's death was a revenge for the murdered boy. But who could have done it? The first and the most obvious suspect was the father of the murdered Gera, Valentin Alenichev. The made inquiries, he worked as a school teacher. 3 months after the death of his son, Valentin Alenichev lived with the thirst of justice and hoped that the murderers would be punished according to the law. However, having learned that no one even wanted to investigate the crime, he decided to seek justice himself. At first, he wanted to talk to a father of the first teenager, who was an army general. In the USSR, there was a joke about army generals. The general gets up in the morning with a hangover. His head hurts and his wife nags, calling him an alcoholic. The general looks in the mirror.
I'm a general.
Да какой ты генерал? Ты просто алкоголик.
Yes, indeed. Alcoholic. No, still a general.
Fechenko Sr. was the same kind of a general, shoulder straps and statues, but in reality he was just an arrogant alcoholic. That evening, as always, General Fechenko was drunk. Having recognized Gera's father, he became furious and could think of nothing better to do than to order his subordinates to beat him up. Lying on the ground and receiving strikes, Valentin imagined that his son was being beaten in exactly the same way. But the school teacher's misfortune didn't end there. A few days later, he was called to the police station and was told that if he didn't calm down, his life would be ruined. Realizing that the entire system was going against him, Valentin Alenichev went to work at school, intending to teach the best lesson of his life. Alright kids, the topic of today's class is Marxist theory fundamentals. Petrov, tell me please, who you want to be when you grow up? Who? A builder? Do you know that this theory is very important for builder? What? Why are you laughing? Petrov, how can you build anything without knowing how the world works? That's it. School classes. In the USSR, there were a number of subjects which even adults were horrified by. The fundamentals of the Marxist theory or the history of Communist Party. For children, it was impossible task to understand what the teacher was talking about. They simply had to memorize the information. That day, the social studies lesson in school was special. The teacher, Valentin Alenichev, didn't mince words, of course, because the topic of the lesson was law in the USSR. Having experienced the whole law, the teacher began to furiously curse the entire system and blame everyone responsible. He went as far as blaming a saint, the ruler of the USSR, Leonid Brezhnev. The children immediately realized that the teacher had gone crazy. No surprise that the content of the lesson reached the headmaster, and this was Valentin Alenichev's last day of work at school. Having lost everything, his son, his job, his respect, Valentin simply wandered the streets or sat on a bench near his house and gazed into the void. He was just doing this when the police arrested him. During the interrogation, the former teacher didn't deny anything, sighed everything, and simply nodded his head to all questions. He wasn't interested in anything. In addition, a search was conducted in Valentin's country house, where the police found an axe very similar to the one found in the bag of the murdered teenager. It seemed that the case of the vengeful father was solved. But while the police were rushing to put Valentin Alenichev in prison, no one asked the question, what happened to the second killer of the boy Gera, Fechenko? Shashlik, or barbecue, one of the favorite ways to spend the free time of Russian and Soviet people. Nature, the smell of burning wood, and fried meat. Delicious. But what to do if you can't cook meat yourself? There is a way out. A shashlik house or a barbecue house. In the USSR, such establishments were quite popular. And in one of the shashlik houses, our story will continue. One day, someone began knocking very loudly on the back door of the barbecue house. When the door opened, the workers saw a teenager. The guy said nothing, just sighed and fell down. An axe was sticking out of his back. The murdered teenager turned out to be the Gera's second killer, Nikolai Fedchenko. The police immediately left for the scene. Judging by the crime pattern, it was clear that the murders of Pavel Varfolomeev and Nikolai Fedchenko were committed by one person. But Gera's father couldn't have done it since he was arrested. Then who? And why does the Avenger use an axe? From the investigation notes. The axe has several scratches, apparently from the contact with the hard surface. The axe shaft has an inventory number. Also, there are several fingerprints. Loader. These days, this profession can hardly be called prestigious, but in the USSR there were places where working as a loader was very lucrative. The position of a loader in a store was especially valuable. The electrical goods, furniture or food, it doesn't matter. Unbelievable opportunities opened up in all areas. In the USSR, there was such a thing as deficit, extremely rare goods which you couldn't come and buy. Basically, these goods were foreign-made. But having right connections, let's say with a loader, you can get any desired items without queues. Of course, the main profit was received by heads and managers, but the loader also got his piece of a pie. In our story, he got the attention of the police. At one furniture factory, detectives found axes with similar inventory numbers and immediately took fingerprints from workers, and a match was found. Dmitry Micholkin, loader. The loader was immediately detained. During the interrogation, he explained that the axe was stolen. He left the tool on the street for only half a minute, and when he came back, the axe was no longer there. It was clear that the worker had nothing to do with it. Then, experienced detective Pavel Burtsev decided to conduct an interesting experiment. Classic Soviet country yards, the same was in our case. Detective Pavel Burtsev decided to check how much time it would take to steal an axe and to leave the country yard. Начали. The shortest route takes 30 seconds. Therefore, stealing an axe was quite a risky business. The attacker couldn't have known how much time the loader would be inside. Or could he? The detective Burtsev comes to the conclusion that the criminal knew for sure that he had at least a minute. Probably he watched the loader's actions many times. That means he lives in one of the neighboring houses. Sometime later, the police received a call that the dog was tortured in one of the garages. People were outraged with the dog's squeals coming from behind the closed door of the garage. They found the owner, but he aggressively said something like, "It's my dog and I do what I want." The police just waved it off. "We don't deal with the dogs." But a couple of days later, they still had to visit this garage. In the garage, the detectives found the body of a man, the dog's owner, with an axe in his back. The reason for murder became clear immediately. In addition to the dead body, the detectives found a ripped shoe, not from mischief, but from hunger, and a crumpled tin can, which the dog could not open. It had clearly been starved and abused. Again, the motive for the murder was clear. The weak and defenseless suffered, and the villain got what he deserved. The murdered man was a Nikolai Good. He broke up with his wife and decided to take out his anger on the dog. For that, he paid with his life. This time, the killer decided not to bring the axe with him, but took it right from the garage. There were no fingerprints, but there was something else, grains of some kind of medicine. In the USSR, there were no private dental clinics, with comfortable chairs, smiling nurses, or cartoons on TV. The only option was state clinics, free but very unpleasant. There was no individual approach as well as good medicine. Therefore, the Soviet citizens postponed going to the dentist and preferred fighting the toothache themselves. Now, we're gonna dilute the soda and everything will be fine. Also, a very popular remedy of that time was streptocide. The tooth was sprinkled with streptocide and surprisingly, it helped. The streptocide particles were found on the eggs which the sadist Good was killed with. The detective Pavel Burtsev couldn't believe it. He knew who was behind all this. A few days ago, he met with a close friend, Mikhail Revyakin. Revyakin complained to Burtsev about a toothache. But when Burtsev suggested Revyakin going to the dentist, he answered that it would be better to sprinkle the tooth with the streptocide. Also, the detective remembered where Revyakin lived, right across from the store where the second axe was stolen. And the detective remembered the life story of a man whom he loved like a son. After the end of the World War II, the country was in decline. Destroyed cities, an economy focused on war. All this didn't contribute to the well-being of citizens. People worked day and night to feed their families. There was no one to look after the children. This is how the Shpana appeared. Small delinquent groups consisted mainly of children. Knives of various sizes and shapes, or even a trophy pistol found at the battleground, and a lot of free time. In this atmosphere, Misha Revyakin was growing up. Being a professor's son, Misha didn't have any need. He had good clothes, and his house is always smelled of tasty food. No need to say that the local muggers weren't just jealous, they simply hated him. That's why Misha Revyakin had only one friend, his faithful dog. He spent all the time with him until something terrible happened. One day, Misha was walking his dog, and some guys from a local gang came up to him trying to take away the bread which Misha was carrying. The boy got scared and gave them the bread, but his dog started barking at the hooligans trying to bite. Then the leader took out a hatchet and threw it at the dog. The dying squeals of his best friend would follow Misha for the rest of his life. After finishing school, Mikhail Revyakin decided to devote his life to justice. That's why he went working for police. But how did the thirst for justice grow into a desire to kill? And even in this case, there was a woman involved. The fact is that Mikhail Revyakin was in love with the girl Marina, who worked as a typist and retyped handwritten protocols. Usually people of this profession don't read carefully what is written, but simply retype the words. But in this case, Marina was very upset by one story. She even burst into tears. Mikhail Revyakin came into her office and asked what happened. Then Marina said that in this case the son of elderly woman was killed and she was left alone. Revyakin said he would deal with it. He found the killer. Surprisingly, it turned out to be the same hooligan who had killed his dog 20 years ago. The hooligan also recognized him and began laughing. In the police officer, he saw the same weak and little boy. Very much in vain. Mikhail Revyakin choked him with his bare hands. After that, Revyakin felt relief. The justice was restored. But this was only one case which was close to him. And how many such cases happen every day? Mikhail decided to do everything in his power. Then he found the case of the boy Gera and his killers. He realized that if the killers killed once and evaded punishment, they would do it the second time, and young sadists would grow up to be adult killers. The thought of this made him take an axe. Mikhail Revyakin was arrested, but he didn't manage to see his sentence. He was found hanged in a prison cell. Was it suicide, or did the connections of the influential parents of the murdered teenagers help him? This will forever remain a mystery. And what to do when law is not on the side of justice. And who was Mikhail Revyakin, a cold-blooded killer or a brave avenger? It's up to you to decide.